Thanks for watching another episode. This is the YouTube version of the Fat Guy Podcast. We do a traditional audio podcast that you can subscribe to on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Just search for Fat Guy Podcast. You can find us on all the social media. Just search for Fat Guy Podcast. So the question I get asked the most since I started a ketogenic diet is why a ketogenic diet? That's what I get asked the most. So it's quite a contrast when you switch from being a plant-based, whole food plant-based person. Not only that, somebody who had success. I lost, 70, 80 pounds that way. It took about a year to make that switch over to a ketogenic diet, which includes eating meats and cheeses and things, is quite dramatic. So before I get into why a ketogenic diet, let me first say that I still try to embrace as much as a plant-based as you probably feasibly can in a ketogenic way. And that includes, rather than having heavy cream, I really like this. The company's called Let's Do Organic, and they do a heavy coconut cream. You can only get it from their website or from Thrive. That's the only two places I've found it. It's a lot cheaper on Thrive, by the way, in case you're interested, but you do have to obviously be a member of Thrive, which is it's like $60 a year. So why a ketogenic diet? First of all, my mother, who's been battling ovarian cancer for 4.5 years now, I had her on a plant-based diet. It's hard to say if it helped her or not, although she has beaten some odds to be here 4.5 years. But, cancer is one of those things where they can't tell you exactly how long you'll be able to beat it. We've met people who were diagnosed stage 3C just like my mom was, who've been around 20 years. Several that have been around 10 or 15 years. My mom also started treatment with a bunch of people who aren't here anymore that started at less than 3Z. They were, stage 2. It's just something you can't put a finger on. But we do know that the stage she was found and the surgery she had prior to entering chemo was called suboptimal. So what we do know is that her chances were much lower than somebody who had optimal surgery. So for her to be here 4.5 years later is remarkable. But in the past 6 months, her condition has turned. I don't know how much a plant-based vegan diet or whole food plant-based diet helped her, but I do believe it helped. But what happened is she reached a point that she could no longer sustain herself on that diet because, as you well know, if you know much about a plant-based diet, the reason it works so well, one of the reasons it works so well for weight loss is because it's not calorically dense food. You have to eat a lot of greens, you have to eat a lot of squash, you have to eat not quite as much, but still a fair amount of beans and lentils and things. You have to eat a lot of that food to get calories. And so my mom has reached a stage where she can no longer eat that much food. She can't physically eat that much food. So I've been searching for a way that I could get, 2,000 calories a day in my mom or more, hopefully, with her having to consume a very small volume. I wanted the volume to be low. And solid food was just horrible. So it turned to a liquid nutrition thing. So what I started researching was, what are the most calorically dense foods that I can get? Calorically dense and preferably liquid or very soluble. And what I arrived at was heavy cream, oils, things of that nature. I didn't know that was a ketogenic diet. I just knew it was the only foods I could find to assemble to get her a lot of calories. So that was why I decided to switch. I did the research on those foods, and lo and behold, I found out that a ketogenic diet also has many therapeutic benefits for people who have cancer. Cancer thrives in a sugar-rich environment. It doesn't matter where the sugar comes from. It doesn't matter where the glucose comes from. Cancer cells don't produce energy the same way a normal cell does. And I'm not going to get into that, but it's a form of fermentation and it requires sugar. And so it's not exactly fermentation, but I've heard a lot of doctors and scientists call it fermentation, but it is a form of fermentation. But I'm not going to get into the technical details. You can research that yourself. So then it became very, very strenuous on me as a caretaker to try to take care of my mom and do a ketogenic thing for her and then do a high-carb plant-based thing for me. And honestly, my weight loss had kind of stalled. And so I decided to just embrace the ketogenic thing myself for me to see how it worked and to simplify my life as a caregiver for my mom. And lo and behold, the weight started dropping and I really started feeling good and my energy levels went up. And the one thing I noticed was that on the plant-based diet, my total daily expenditure, also my resting basal metabolic rate, was very low. It was around 2,200 calories a day. Now, for a guy my size, a resting metabolic rate of 2,200 calories a day is very low. Matter of fact, all these calculators estimated at 29, 3,000, something way up there. So I have a spreadsheet where I chart my caloric intake, and it gives me a running weekly average of my weight, and it'll actually tell you what your total daily expenditure is. So in the time that I've been on the ketogenic diet using that sheet, I've compared it back to the time I was on the whole plant-based diet. My total daily expenditure now is up around 2,900 calories a day, whereas on a plant-based diet, it had dropped all the way down to 22. So eating this way has raised my metabolic rate, and so I'm just losing weight a lot faster. And I'm eating more food. So there's a lot of reasons to do it, but those are the main reasons. One, it was a matter of necessity for my mom. It became a matter of convenience for me, but it also became a matter of research. The research into the therapeutic benefits of a ketogenic diet for a person with cancer are phenomenal. And if you question that, I encourage you to look into it. Now, that's not to discount all the research that has been shown on a plant-based diet. But my mom did a plant-based diet for 4 years fighting cancer, and she never achieved any kind of a miraculous result. She only entered what they call, no, I forget that it's a 3-letter abbreviation. If you know much about cancer, you probably know what it is. No visible disease or something. In other words, they did a scan and they couldn't see it. They didn't call it remission, but it's essentially remission. But it only lasted like a few weeks and it was back. So she never had these, I see these people who, we switched to a plant-based diet and cured cancer. Well, that didn't happen for my mom. And I don't know how much it helped her. I think it helped her some, but I can tell you this. Since we've switched to a ketogenic diet for my mom, when she goes now to see her oncologist, her blood markers are all great with the exception of one is magnesium. And if you know much about chemo, my mom's been on chemo for 4 years. It destroys your ability to retain and store and such with magnesium. It just damages your body in that way. But she stopped having hemoglobin problems. She stopped having platelet problems. She stopped having white blood count problems. She stopped having, total blood count problems. All that is reversed by putting her on a ketogenic diet. When she was on the plant-based diet, she was always having to have blood transfusions. All these things we were having to do to try to keep her blood up. She would actually miss treatments because her blood wouldn't be where it needed to be. And so they'd have to wait another week and try to build up and bolster her blood to be able to handle the treatment. So a ketogenic diet has completely reversed that. It's been remarkable. The last 2 trips to the oncologist for infusions, he's like, you have the healthiest blood I've ever seen of any cancer patient. And not only that, your blood is probably healthier than the average person that you would meet on the street. So a ketogenic diet has done wonders for my mom, and it's done wonders for me. And I know that it goes against the ethical part of veganism. I understand that. I'm a person who, my mom comes before animals. Now, I'm sorry if that makes me a bad person. To a certain extent, I come before animals, but does that mean that I don't think that we need to fix this horrible atrocity that is factory farming? We do. Not only is it just horrible for animals, it's horrible for our health, the things they do to these animals. And the second thing I will say is that Americans, and I think this is in most developed countries, but especially in America and maybe in places like Australia too, we are obsessed with protein. People eat way too much protein. Like, I do a ketogenic diet, but I don't do the amount of protein that any of the ketogenic calculators recommend. I'm not doing 100 grams of protein a day or 150 grams of protein. I'm shooting for around 60 grams of protein a day. I want my percentage of calories from protein to be in the 10% range, 15% range. And nobody will agree with that, but I'm fine. That's what I did on a plant-based diet. I actually had less on a plant-based diet. Most of the time I would be in the 5% range. But I do believe plant-based protein is a lot more readily absorbable and a lot more readily available, and so you probably don't need quite as much. So with the animal protein, I'm doing 10-15%, which is still way lower than any nutrition or doctor will tell you. So I am trying to keep my animal consumption still very low. That doesn't mean that I don't. But look, I do try to be a somewhat conscious person, especially knowing what I know and learned coming from veganism. It had an effect on me, and it will always affect my life. My ultimate goal is I really would like to continue this and see if the weight loss and health markers continue, because a lot more health markers have improved. It's not just my weight. It's done a lot of things for me. But in a summation, that's why a ketogenic diet for me. I know it was a long explanation. I didn't mean for this presentation to go on for 14 minutes, so I apologize. But I wanted to cover everything. I have a lot of people that look at these videos, every video that comes out. Now, you may have just stumbled across this video, so you're not one of those people. But for people that have followed my progression of losing weight, I wanted that to continue. Anyway, I've lost a lot of weight since going ketogenic, which was January the 26th, and it is now March the 26th. So it's been 2 months. So in 2 months, I've lost a considerable amount of weight. It's been very fast. I think I'm averaging about 2.5 pounds a week or something like that. So it's been remarkable. If you enjoy what we do here, you want to follow my research, studies, success, pitfalls, downfalls, tips, more about the ketogenic diet. Probably will do things about cancer too. Make sure you like and subscribe, share with a friend, and follow us on social media. Fat Guy Podcast is what you're looking for. At Fat Guy Podcast, the at symbol. It's Fat Guy Podcast. That's the username on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. The website is thefatguypodcast.com. And you can find us and subscribe to the audio version of our podcast, which is generally different than the video version. Sometimes they're the same, but it's usually two different things. And if you want to do that, just subscribe to the Fat Guy Podcast on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.